I dig in, and I'm going to dig in, our folks over at Levin TV put together, at my request, a montage. Now, this montage could have gone on much longer, but it is a montage of the magnificent media reports about yours truly. It's actually hilarious, because they've been caught and they're stuck. Because now they're afraid there aren't going to be any connections whatsoever to the so-called Russian scandal involving Trump world. Having made every insinuation possible, particularly this New York Times February 14 article, which I may or may not read in hour 3, depending on where we are. It's just incredible. They do hit job after hit job, leaving the belief through their propaganda that something terribly untoward has taken place with respect to Trump world. And there's nothing. Nothing. And I speak as somebody who despises Putin and considers Russia, at least for now under Putin, our enemy. And I even consider Trump's, I don't even know what to call it, his passivity, or worse, towards Putin to be rather bizarre. But so what? And you gotta love the way the reports go now. Now it's all passivity. Well, there were intercepts and they happened to catch, a few people. But there was an awful lot of them talking to the Russian intelligence people. An awful lot of them talking to the Russian ambassador. Now, we're not saying there's anything wrong. As a matter of fact, we're saying we haven't found anything yet. Then we have the FISA court reports, separate and apart from BBC, The Guardian. I don't trust them. Oh, okay. New York Times changing its headline on January 19th to January 20th from intercept to wiretap. But we're not talking about wiretapping Trump Tower. I never said Trump Tower was wiretapped. The Associated Press today. I sent an email to the reporter. Said I never said that Barack Obama had Donald Trump's phones tapped. I want a correction. All right, but in any event, here's the little montage I put together, or my folks put together for you. Go ahead.
White House officials say that the president's sources were various conservative outlets, most prominently perhaps radio host Mark Levin, who seemed to take 3 basic chunks of information and combine them into one conspiracy theory of what he calls a silent coup.
And on the conservative Breitbart website, which Friday highlighted a conspiracy-loving radio talk show host, Mark Levin.
Now, the story asserted that Obama has been trying to undermine Trump at every turn. As you can see from the headline, it was inspired by a Thursday night radio segment by conservative talk show host Mark Levin.
Apparently, this idea came from right-wing radio host and unlicensed gynecologist Mark Levin, who ranted about these wiretaps on his radio.
Hold on. It's a funny line. I think I've used that at some point, haven't I, Mr. Producer? A line like that years ago? Anyway, go ahead.
Written up by Breitbart as Mark Levin to Congress investigate Obama's silent coup versus Trump.
What does the White House gain by the President of by Steve Bannon most likely handing the President of the United States a Breitbart article and talking about what a rabid right-wing talk show host has been theorizing?
Start with firebrand conservative radio host Mark Levin. Briefly, for people who don't know, who is he?
He's got quite a following, and he's not just a conservative figure, but often espousing relatively radical positions about the need to reinvent the Constitution and government and ways in which we think about society.
The notion that Mark Levin is a news outlet. It's not the New York Times. It's not the Washington Post. It's not the Wall Street Journal. It's not the LA Times. It's not a major news network. It's Mark Levin, a guy who, I know what talk radio guys do, on left and right, mostly on right. They rile people up with outrageous charges, and nobody keeps count of them. But here's the President of the United States getting his information from these people.
Evidence for suggesting President Obama has committed a crime seems pretty thin.
The detailed speculation from a conspiracy-loving talk show host, Mark Levin.
Okay. I think we can now officially declare that Trump has a worse media diet than the son of Sam Killer. And he got all his news from a talking dog who told him to murder.
It is pretty interesting, isn't it? Pretty funny, actually. Well, we will keep an eye on this. We will keep an eye on the reports. We will keep an eye on what Congress comes up with. They have completely pivoted, ladies and gentlemen, having insinuated deep, dark connections with very sleazy writing. And we can go through that. As a matter of fact, I'm working on it. We'll go through it one day. Very sleazy tactics. Really Alinsky-like tactics. And it's inbred in them. Not all of them, but too many of them. It's their conspiracy. It's the Democrat conspiracy. It's the demand for special prosecutors. It's the claim about this dossier and Trump and all those disgusting allegations in there. That's the media. I just went through their charges. And I asked a lot of questions. And the Associated Press has done it again today. They cannot help themselves. And I sent an email to the reporter, and I said, "You're going to correct this?" And assuming I have his right email address, he has not replied. All right, let's get into this. Let's get into what's going on Capitol Hill. I have a question for you. Have you heard the line, "We can only do so much to the budget reconciliation process"? This is Washington speak. This is the budget reconciliation process. They agreed some time ago. It may have been the Budget Act of 1974, but whenever it is, it doesn't matter. That when it comes to getting a budget done and reconciling the differences between the House and the Senate bills and so forth, that would be immune from the filibuster rule in the Senate. It's called the budget reconciliation process. I don't pretend to be an expert, but I do know this. I know how the Constitution works. When Paul Ryan was on here many years ago, maybe we'll pull this up for next week, Mr. Producer. When he was on here many years ago, he said to me about 85% of Obamacare could be repealed through the budget reconciliation process. I have repeated that time and time and time again. 85%. That's a big deal. We'll take it, right? Now, apparently, big chunks of it cannot be. So somebody's changed their opinions. Somebody's changed their opinions, despite the fact the Supreme Court in King versus Burwell, as my buddy Chip Roy writes in Federalist, the court ruled about the intertwining, essentially, of these regulations and that they're inseparable from the rest of the law. Now, these regulations, these are the killers. These are the cost drivers. These regulations. And their budgetary impact is significant. So to say that these regulations do not come within the budget reconciliation process is absurd. Now, who decides if they come within the budget reconciliation process or not? Who decides? The parliamentarian of the Senate. I'm going to read this to you. It's a piece at the Federalist website by my buddy Chip Roy. Chip Roy worked for Governor Perry for a period of time. He worked for Senator Ted Cruz as chief of staff for a period of time. He's an extraordinarily bright man and a friend of mine. And here's what he says. I like the Senate parliamentarian very much and consider her a friend from my time in the Senate. I prayed for her when she had a family loss. She prayed for me when I was sick with cancer. She's a good public servant. But she's neither elected nor the final word on the future of health care for Americans. What she offers is her view on the Senate rules. At the end of the day, the Senate decides the Senate rules. Let me repeat that. The Senate decides the Senate rules. In this instance, both the parliamentarian and the Senate can and should find that full repeal of Obamacare through the budget reconciliation process, and thus 51 votes, is permissible. Republican leadership has long been saying that if full repeal is sent from the House to the Senate, it will be deemed to violate Senate rules under budget reconciliation. They claim this is because the insurance regulations and mandates are merely incidental to the budgetary impact of Obamacare, and therefore would draw a budget point of order requiring 60 votes to fully repeal the laws, insurance regulations, and mandates. This is false. Obamacare's onerous insurance regulations and mandates are the primary drivers of individuals and families' rising premiums and deductibles. They are the very backbone of Obamacare's oppressive centralization of health care. The regulations and mandates are crippling the health insurance market, driving up costs for patients, doctors, and insurers, and degrading the quality of care that patients are receiving. To argue that their budgetary impact is merely incidental to the rest of the law is absurd on its face. Even the Obama administration made this very argument before the Supreme Court in the case of King versus Burwell, arguing forcibly that the regulations are inseparable from the rest of the law. Predicated on that alone, Congress has a case that full repeal through budget reconciliation is viable. Yet, neither the House nor the Senate have even attempted to pass a full repeal of the law through reconciliation. Let me repeat that. They won't even attempt it. The Senate parliamentarian hasn't even adjudicated whether she believes a full repeal is allowed under reconciliation rules. After 8 years of promising to fully repeal Obamacare, Congress has not even tried to do so in a process requiring just 51 votes in the Senate. Also, should the parliamentarian present an unfavorable ruling, the Senate has the power, as Senator Ted Cruz articulated, to put Vice President Mike Pence in the chair and overrule the parliamentarian. The Senate decides, the Senate rules. Congress has promised to fully repeal this catastrophic law for nearly 8 years. Now that they control all levers of power, they're hiding behind excuses and procedural theory to avoid making good on their promises. Congressional leaders are putting the hypothetical opinion of an unelected Senate employee above the promises they made to the American people about the preservation of America's crumbling health care system and above the quality of their constituents' health care, all as an excuse to avoid taking a consequential vote and doing the right thing for all Americans. They are out of excuses to finally make good on their promise to fully repeal the catastrophic Obamacare. And the American people are out of patience. So let's recap this so even the New York Times can comprehend it. Even the Associated Press, what's the guy's name? Jonathan Lemire, or Lemire, L-E-M-I-R-E. Try and take down my words accurately if you're going to repeat them, Mr. Reporter. And it's this. Number one, we don't even know what the parliamentarian is actually going to do because nobody's presented it to her in the form of an actual bill yet. Number two, how can it be that cost-driving regulations, the heart and soul of what is destroying the financial heart of this Obamacare, is considered other than budgetary? Number three, in the end, it's the Senate that makes the Senate rules, not a parliamentarian. It's the Senate, and the Vice President sitting in the chair. Now, I'll add a number four. There's nothing in the Constitution that creates a filibuster rule. As a matter of fact, early on in the Senate, there was no filibuster rule. They adopted it somewhat later, and it looks nothing today like it did back then. And they've adjusted the filibuster rule in the past. Harry Reid himself and the Democrats, as you know, through the so-called nuclear option, called the Reid option, they blocked the filibuster rule, the use of the filibuster, when it came to appointees within the Obama administration, as well as the lower courts, the district and the circuit courts. They let it stand when it comes to the Supreme Court. So the filibuster rule has been adjusted. It has not always existed. And it seems to me the Constitution comes first. So why wouldn't the Republicans want to try this? I'll tell you why. I'm convinced there are so many moderates and liberals among them who want these major aspects of Obamacare to stay. Whether it's kids, young adults, I should say, staying on their parents' insurance to the age of 26, or the massive expansion of Medicaid, which a majority of the governors have embraced, or whatever it is. They don't want to abolish those things. So here's what I think. I don't think they have 51 votes in the Senate to repeal Obamacare. I don't think all the Republicans in the Senate would vote to repeal Obamacare. So they keep bringing up this parliamentarian and the filibuster rule, the 60 votes, so as not to expose the Susan Collinses and the Lisa Murkowskis and the rest of them, who in fact would not vote to abolish Obamacare. I think that's what's going on. We have a relative handful of more liberal members of the Republican caucus, if you will, who are gumming up the entire works. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.